Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Tuesday, May the 14th, 2019, in our session on entrepreneurship and Asian high-tech industries. I'm really happy that today we can have a panel of entrepreneurs who are from South Korea and who are working in companies that really are cross-border between South Korea and the U.S. and talk about the whole kind of cross-border experience and what Silicon Valley is for entrepreneurs who are from other places and various other topics. So standing closest to me is Mr. S.J. Jung, Sangyong, and S.J. is a serial entrepreneur. He started founding companies while he was still in college. He got his undergraduate degree in business administration and a master's in human-computer interface from Yonsei University. He is also a user experience designer and a full-stack developer. So in 2015, he founded a company named Sentbe in Korea, which is a fintech international money transfer service. And he stepped down to become an advisor to Sentbe and went on to found a new startup called Upple, which is what he'll talk about today. And Upple is a company that connects Korean graphic designers and global clients in the rest of the world. So we'll ask SJ to go first, but before we ask you for prepared remarks, I want to also introduce Bryan Jin. And Bryan is the business operations manager for a Korean startup company named Yosemite X. And Bryan is the finance manager and lead product designer at Yosemite X. He got his BA in economics from that school across the bay, so here in the US. And he was the first employee to join the founder of the company, YT Kim, and two blockchain core engineers. So he's been deeply involved in product development and led product marketing functions for the company, which has a first ever public blockchain without a native cryptocurrency attached. So he's working on building enterprise adoption of this Yosemite Public Blockchain. We'll talk more about that as we go along. First of all, SJ, let me ask you to give some prepared remarks, and we can sit down either here or over here. And why don't we take the audience so we can see the slides. Okay. This is great. SJ, floor is yours.
Oh, sorry. So, hi, I'm SJ, and I'm CEO of Upple. My wife is a PhD candidate in comparative literature, and since it's a study of comparing literature from multiple countries, it is very important to physically be there to do the research in those countries. And these are the countries me and my wife will be staying just in this year. It's about 10 long distance flights. And the longest period I stay in one place is about 2 months. Today I would like to talk about how I founded two startups while traveling around the world. I came to the United States when in 2014 with my wife when she started the PhD program in the University of Illinois. I was working as a freelancer web developer at that time, and I made good enough money doing it. So the experience of working from home gave me the confidence that I could survive any place if I am with my laptop. And also that was how I was able to come following my wife without any tangible plan. Also, I always believed that the remote team could work as well, so I founded a startup called Sentbe in 2015 with two co-founders in Korea remotely. Sentbe is a fintech company that offers cheaper, easier, and faster international money transfer service. I led the product development with engineers and designers as a co-president. And we worked as a remote team, but there was no problem delivering the product and also improving the product. However, fintech area was more had more compliance-related issues than product-related issues. One of the difficulties to run a startup in South Korea is the regulatory barriers. In Korea, everything that is not explicitly allowed in the law is considered to be illegal. According to the media, more than half of globally successful 100 startups, you cannot even start in South Korea, and it includes Airbnb, Uber, and Ant Financial from China. Especially for Uber, Korea is famous as a market that Uber didn't even stand a chance. Sentbe also had to go through this long tunnel of compliance issues, and we had to shut down our service for more than 6 months. And it seriously limited the opportunity and contribution we can give as a product group. And since I was in the United States and I was leading the product, there wasn't much I can do for the company to proceed to the front. And that's why I decided to step down and move on to my next journey. However, for me, remote work gave me an ultimate freedom. It allowed me to stay with the love of my life and still build a great product and growing business. I thought remote work could solve other people's problem as well, so I tried to find some other problems to solve with remote. For one, Korea is known for its high passion to the education. And because of that, there are many highly educated professionals in many areas. However, the fundamental problem in Korean industry is that it's too small as a market. Usually it is told that it should be over 100 million population to be self-sufficient, but Korean population is only half of that, and it is even decreasing right now. As a result, professionals in Korea usually do not get compensated enough for their capability, and the only alternative for them is to go abroad, and usually it is to the States. And that's why I founded Upple with, again, 2 co-founders, and again, remotely. Upple is a remote-based platform that connects Korean designers and global clients that have design needs. We also provide collaboration tools that is tailored for design-related communication. Korea has a huge pool of college-educated designers who do not have enough opportunity in their career path, and average salary is barely over $20,000. On the other hand, in the United States, good designers are very difficult to find and expensive to work with. Market size of all graphic design in the United States is about 15 billion. And even if you narrow it down to only outsourcing, it's about 1 billion. So if remote collaboration for design works very well, it could be a perfect arbitrage to leverage. And for that to be possible, it is crucial to have well-defined job description and well-managed communication tools. Upple builds design system as a shared guideline with clients, and we use it for the reference for the future design. And we also provide project management tool and image-based annotation tools for effective communication. What Upple is trying to achieve in the design area, it is possible to extend it to more areas and more countries. Actually, it is not hard to find Indian developers or Ukrainian designers from outsourcing platforms like Upwork, even in these days. Also, many Bay Area startups founded by expats, they are already leveraging remote work by building an engineering team back in their home countries. And it's much more cost efficient. So remote work is the new normal. Upple itself is a 100% remote team, and 6 of us are living in 4 different cities. It also allows us to have presence in multiple countries, and we have Korean corporation to be able to utilize government grants. And this is one of uniqueness of Korean startup ecosystem. Korean startup ecosystem is heavily driven by government directly or indirectly. Government funds contribute to the venture capitals as limited partners, and they also grant stipends directly to the startups as well. While there are pros and cons on the way they are supporting the ecosystem, it's not a smart move if you don't take their money, even if you can. As an early stage startup with tight budget, we were able to stay in the Bay Area for 2 months to meet potential clients. Thanks to a Korean government program that supports Korean startups to go abroad. Also, we are under the process of incorporating the US corporation as well. It's reasonable for us to have US corporation since we are dealing with US clients as well. So one dilemma we are trying to find the answer to is how to set the relationship between Korean corporation and the US corporation. If the US corporation becomes a headquarter, the government grant we can receive from Korean government will be limited, and if the Korean corporation becomes a headquarter, it's not easy to fundraise from the US, specifically the Valley investors, which will be crucial for long-term growth. Being performant when working remotely made it possible for me to found my second startup while living abroad. And now it's Apple's vision to let people to work across border without any limitation. When you think of Uber or Airbnb, just a few years ago, everyone asked who would let strangers in your house or in your car. But nobody asks that questions anymore. So here's the question. Do you think people can work as a team, even if they are not in the same office? Thank you.
Thanks, SJ. So let me get the other presentation set up and ask you a question. So right now, how do you attract new designers to be kind of working with Upple? How do you get new people to use the platform?
So right now we are using both private channels and public channels. So one of our co-founders is Korean designer, and she's trying to let her friends into the pool so that we could work with them. And also we are looking for many open bulletin boards and many online communities so that they could know us and start working with us.
Okay, and while you're here in the Bay Area, you have an office in Plug and Play?
Right now, yeah, we do. We are in the program of the Plug and Play right now.
Okay. So good. That's great for now. We'll come back. We'll have plenty of chances to ask more and talk more about your companies. For now, I'd like to ask Bryan to come up and talk to us about Yosemite X. The floor is yours.
Thank you. All right. Hello, my name is Bryan. Thanks for having me talk to lecture. So I'm from a startup in Palo Alto. We're located, our office is down on University Avenue. And we're a blockchain startup company. And our founder is from Korea with focus on developing a solution for a lot of enterprise and business use cases on what they can do with the blockchain as a technology without all the hypes of, now that all the hypes about the cryptocurrencies and everything has died down, we're trying to bring the real use cases to make enterprise solutions for businesses to use the technology. So Yosemite X, were founded in 2013 when our founder, IT Kim, he had the idea of bringing he used to work in the entertainment business in Korea, and he had an idea of creating this like a middleman-less distribution channel for the music distribution, so music industry, so that he worked with two different blockchain engineers to create this system where they can actually connect the producers and the audience directly. And this idea, when it was still in the beginning stages, got in touch with Sean Fanning, who is the co-founder of Napster. And he himself is like a very much of like a musician. So he took very serious interest in what we had going. So he actually met with YT to invite him to come over to Silicon Valley and start our business here. And that's when I met him after I graduated from the college across the bay. Was that we were just getting started in terms of setting our base in Palo Alto, trying to tap into the brightest minds of what the Bay Area has to offer, and where the center of the technological innovations are happening. We wanted to take advantage of such opportunity to basically test out and compete against, I guess, with what the best has to offer. So that's when we started and working in the United States, trying to develop a blockchain solution to figure out how to best distribute the music and all these other informational transfer. And what we ran into is the fact that we try to build off of the existing technologies using Ethereum, EOS, if you guys are familiar with the blockchain as a technology. But we were soon faced with the limitations of what the current technology has to offer in terms of bringing in like a viable solution to the market. So we decided to actually pause on our initial goal and actually trying to solve the matter more directly by developing the underlying blockchain technology first. In order to create this cryptocurrency-less blockchain, so that we can actually utilize a tool for what it is instead of getting mixed up with like the disaster of the reliance on like a native cryptocurrency, which is making the entire network too volatile for any actual usages. So we spent the last couple of years developing our own blockchain protocol, which we have finished and is called Yosemite Public Blockchain. And it is up and the mainnet in itself is up and running right now. I mean, if you consider this, you can consider this as like a equivalent of like internet when it first came out. The internet itself is a network, but then it is up and running. It connects people, accounts, and what we thought it needs to do is have like a use case of actual, just like how internet had search engines, emails, blogs, or other use cases, services that are being built on top of the underlying network. So Yosemite Public Blockchain is like an equivalent of like an internet. What we've built is the ecosystem where a lot of the services can utilize the potential that it has. The unique thing about it, I guess, is the fact that we don't have a cryptocurrency, native cryptocurrency, so it's not reliant on like Ethereum, Bitcoin, and therefore, we don't have to be subjected to the price volatility aspect of the server costs and things like that. And speaking of the services that could be built on top of it is why we developed the Yosemite Cart, which is pretty much the first real viable solution that anybody can actually use the blockchain technology for in order to have like a real service that they can attach, use. We're working with rolling that out towards, later this month actually, as like a first official launch of it, so that we're able to utilize blockchain in order to connect individual accounts and provide better payment service between the customer and the merchants.
Is it a standard credit card or a
So
debit
it's not.
card?
It's different than like a standard credit card in a sense. The utility, I guess, would be very much similar, but it's going to be different fundamentally because it's the idea of using blockchain is to bypass all the intermediary services. That includes, the Visa, MasterCard, as well as all the payment, I guess, gateways or facilitators, so that we're able to connect. If I'm paying you, then you would get the money directly from me instead of me having to go through like multiple channels in order to send that payment across.
Okay.
So it's literally just taking the utility of what blockchain as a technology can offer and making the use case out of it. Along the way, what we've experienced is basically our founder. He's from Korea, and even though we had our technology, we developed our technology, the Yosemite Public Blockchain, and the use case of it, and we've battle tested it against many different blockchain enthusiasts or the brightest minds of what the study groups and the other these like meetups or like these conferences attendees have to offer regarding as far as the blockchain technology goes, and we've had no problem impressing the entire audience or anybody that we speak with regarding the technology. I think the hardest part as a company, I guess, with this foundation from Korea that has to experience starting our base in the States is the fact that we just don't have much of like a network that we can get plugged into, in a sense that we have an opportunity to present in front of the major players or the larger VCs or any other. The network opportunity is what I think is the biggest challenge that a lot of these companies who don't have as much of a affiliation or the background in the States has to go through. Sorry, lost my train of thoughts. Right, and I think what SJ was saying earlier too is that Korean government has recently been putting a lot more efforts into supplying, I guess, the fundings to get the startup ecosystem up and running in Korea. And while I think that is a good approach in terms of the market itself, the growth and the oversaturation of the market, so that there's more opportunity for innovation and everything to grow. While I think that is a good idea for the governments to actually start supporting the ecosystem of entrepreneurship, I think the challenges that it is facing right now is the lack of the know-how, in a sense, that it's not just about putting the money into where everything is building up. I think from the government, especially because it is the government, they try to be fair, and then they try to distribute their resources equally to pretty much a lot of the young entrepreneurs. Whereas it's kind of like you're taking a risk in a sense that you starting an early stage startups. You don't know how many of those are going to actually pan out. So I think from the experiences of things like that, a lot of the better work can be done if the government actually take time to limit and review and limit how they utilize those resources. In a sense that I think more money can be focused and support can be focused and help the businesses to scale rather than getting off the ground is I think how not only from the government's perspective but anybody in a VC or this ecosystem of being associated with the entrepreneurship can better utilize their efficiency, their input versus output can be better made with companies that have shown their usability, feasibility, growth to a certain extent. Yeah, so our focus going forward, like we say, we decided that because, instead of like trying to figure out a way, trying to reach out to whoever and anybody, that we thought the best use cases is basically to go out there and prove ourselves with the metrics in whatever way that we can generate them, and using those metrics to actually the use cases to prove our worth and get the recognition and the inroads to the interest from the connections that we currently do not have, rather than trying to figure out how can we get in contact with person ABC. So those are the challenges that we're currently going through, but we're excited to take on as well, and to grow and becoming, I guess, like a universal blockchain solution would be where we want to head up next.
That's great. Thanks, Bryan.
Thank you.
So I tell you what I'd like to do. SJ, would you sit in the middle? Bryan, you sit there, and I'll sit on the end.
Okay.
And I got some questions I want to ask before we get into general audience discussion. And starting off with your own stories, okay? So, SJ, you were a serial entrepreneur in Korea, right? In Seoul, while you were a student and after you were a student. And I'm curious, were a lot of your friends kind of amazed at your decision to go the entrepreneurship route?
The thing is, even if the ecosystem itself grew much bigger, when I was in college, it's about year 2005 and a few years after that, there weren't a lot of people who are into the startups, and there wasn't even a word startup in Korean ecosystem at all. Yeah, they called it venture company.
Venture company, yeah.
So, my friends always thought that I was not normal. Yeah, I was unusual of them, and
so what was it like to put together the resources to get a company started? Because you got to find somebody to work with you, and you also have to find some money. In Korea, was that really difficult? Also for Sentbe, was it really difficult?
So early years before Sentbe, I was more into like creative area for my so-called items for my startup. Mm-hmm. The reason I chose a fintech when I started Sentbe was that I experienced a lot of failure before, so I decided to go with the trend. And since when I started the Sentbe, the fintech was what VCs are looking for to invest in, so it wasn't really hard to fundraise money.
Okay.
Yeah. So the way we sell is important, I think. But
so what about getting people to work with you?
So it's not the direct answer, but the reason I learned to code is that because it's not easy to meet people. I mean, gather people to work with my project. I wanted to be able to start my own project multiple times. It takes several tries to succeed at least one of them. So that's one of the reasons. And it's still not easy to gather good people, talents. Mm-hmm. And it's also, I want to ask how to do that.
Yeah, sure. Because actually, in what you're doing, connecting designers to customers, the issue of trust is a huge issue.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the designers have to trust you that you're giving them good opportunities, and the big companies, are trusting you to be able to introduce good designers. How do you establish that? I mean, you talk about a remote team. That's probably the easy part to do remotely.
So I see that as a typical chicken and egg problem. And also one of the reasons I chose design over development or some other areas is that, as I mentioned in the slides, Korean designers are very eager to find jobs. So that made for us to gather designers somehow easier. So when it's been about like several weeks since we actively started looking for designers to work with. And yes, some of them have their doubts, but they still come to us and ask for us to join us. Yeah, actually, it's not a good news that their economy is that bad, but for us, it's an opportunity to solve one of those chicken and egg problems.
Well, and actually, you're making a real contribution if you can help people get work during a down economy. So that's great. One more question before I put Bryan on the hot seat. The last question for right now is, okay, you've been 5 different places around the world this past year.
One of those are including the places I'll visit this year.
Right. Yeah. Okay, including places you will visit. How do you think you'll decide on where you settle down? Where will the company be located eventually?
So the biggest advantage of being a remote entrepreneur is that you can settle down anywhere you want to.
Yeah. Okay.
But honestly, my place of settle down will be heavily dependent on my wife's career path.
Okay.
But if I have choice, I would like to go where the ocean is and where tech is. So actually, this place is perfect for me.
Okay. Okay. Good. Thank you very much for saying that. So Bryan, at Berkeley, right? Mm. How did you decide on kind of a startup company path instead of the traditional route of going to work for a big company?
Right. I mean, it was an opportunity that came across me upon graduating, as I was interviewing for many different opportunities that I could be going into, and it was really more about a personal attachment for me, I guess. Uh-huh. The idea of utilizing this new technology to basically create this like a new channel of like a music distribution, and just the I guess like a charismatic persona of YT that I came across.
Yeah, YT is the founder and CEO of the company.
Yes, sorry. Mm-hmm. He wanted to be here, but then his business trip got overextended, I guess.
Okay.
So he couldn't attend the schedule and.
Well, but I actually really wanted to focus this session on people who are more or less intentionally in the United States and not back in the home country, right?
Right. So he's going back and forth, and then basically he's more or less the reason why he set his eyes on starting this business and focusing our efforts in the U.S. market was, like I said earlier, was because that we wanted to be in the midst of all the the brightest minds and see what opportunity. And just other than the fact that it's a sheer bigger market compared to Korea, but also it just because we're dealing with like a technological innovation.
Yeah. Okay. But back to your own story. Mm-hmm. So, okay, Berkeley is a big elite school. So did your family give you a hard time when you decided to go to a startup company instead of take a big company job?
No, actually, they've been very supportive of the fact that I found something that I really wanted to do. Actually, it's not my startup, but in a sense that I found value in what we were working on, and it's pretty much like the first time in a while that they heard anything that I was super excited about doing as well. So they took it as like an opportunity for me to, I guess, start my career working with a entrepreneur company, I guess, a startup.
Okay. So with regard to Yosemite, do you think you could do the same kind of trial user acquisition and market development in Korea that you can do here? I mean, I realize there are reasons why the company's here, but user acquisition, getting people to try out, the Yosemite Cart and so forth.
Right. Actually, it's actually been a much more difficult task for us to be tackling the U.S. market as our go-to-market strategy, because of the fact that YT he's had like a long experience of being a serial entrepreneur himself, of like 15 years of businessman. He has like a pretty good enough like a connection and the networks that he can get plugged into and get introduced to in Korea. So it would be a lot more easier path if we actually just stayed and focused in Korean.
With the possible wrinkle of what you mentioned, SJ, about the attitude toward government regulation. Whereas here, if the law doesn't specifically say you can't do something, people will try to do it. And it is kind of the opposite in Korea, where if the law doesn't allow you to do it specifically.
Right, but during our course of the action, we weren't specifically dealing with something that was defined as not illegal, but something that was not outright defined.
It wasn't really questionable.
Yeah, so it wasn't really a question of we were just gonna have a better coverage here versus over there. It was just more about the opportunity that we decided to tackle on as our main target in the States.
Well, a peer-to-peer kind of credit card is a really interesting idea. And, blockchain is a really interesting solution to making that happen. But, yeah, you must have a lot to do with the up and down of even though you're not cryptocurrency based, do you find that investor interest or people interest in the company really changes depending on what's happening with Bitcoin?
Obviously one of the first questions that are being asked is how do we fare against the regulatory bodies or whatever that are trying to engage with a cryptocurrency as well as this whole issue of a credit card system. Not to mention the fact that we don't have a cryptocurrency that are involved, which are prime targets of what the regulatory bodies are concerned about regarding the technology itself. So we're not too worried or concerned about that aspect. But figuring out the feasibility of it as a new type of a payment system, where the financial, a FinCEN, where as far as a FinCEN and everybody is concerned, is what we are, working actively with our attorneys as well as a group of advisors.
Yeah, one more about the card. So Yosemite receives some sort of a fee for each transaction, or how is that going to work? What's the business model?
Right. So our business model is it comes from the fact that we are for providing the ecosystem and the platform for a lot of the merchants and the customers to be connected to. Basically, we're buying a usable store balance from the merchants directly, and then basically we're reselling that to the customers, and then we make margins between the two. Whereas how much basically it's like a Costco model where we bulk buy in advance so that we can actually provide that to and resell that to the end users.
Basically, you're the whole ecosystem around a market.
Yeah,
a marketplace.
It's just that we just don't have as much intermediary services that are involved.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
One last question for both of you on sort of the personal side. So, what would you see as the ideal outcome for your companies? We talk a lot about exits in this class, but not necessarily exit. If Yosemite is wildly successful, and if Upple is wildly successful, what will happen? How do you see? What would you see in the future? Say 5 years from now or 10 years from now. Do you think you will have an exit, be bought out by somebody, or?
Right. Granted that I'm not the final decision maker on this topic, but
right.
I
that gives
think
you freedom to talk.
But I think the ideal situation would be for us to be in a position where we are, I guess, being bought out, and like we're not going to say, I guess, no to the fact that there are interested parties who are looking to buy us out in order to integrate to their solutions or things like that. But it's not the end of the road for us in the sense that we wanted to provide utilize the technology to create a solution in fintech industry.
So your
music
main
industry.
goal is to make this happen.
Yeah. So our Yosemite Cart and our current project is not the one and only goal for us. So we have series of other projects that we are interested in tackling on.
Okay. Other
one
use
at a time. One at a time.
Yeah. Okay.
So it will be like a series of tackling these issues.
Okay. SJ, what about Upple?
So I see this as so working better at remote is also a trend, I think. It's not as hot potato as blockchain or other fintech area, but it's a steady trend that other companies say that in year 2027, more than half of people will work remotely. I mean, as a freelancers. So I see this as a steady trend, and how we work will be changed steadily.
Mm-hmm.
So in 5 or 10 years later, I don't see what we are doing is finished. So I think I'll be still doing this in more areas and in more different ways.
Mm-hmm. Okay. No, this really is. This is a huge new possibilities in really how work is done. But there's a lot of things to work out. The areas where it works well together and the areas where maybe more difficult. Okay, why don't we open the floor to audience questions? Go ahead.
I have a specific question for Jesse. Where are your, I couldn't catch it, where are your maximum number of customers?
So SJ, where are your customers now? The people who are buying the design services?
They're in the United States. So mostly we are focusing on startups who just hired the marketing people or the first CMO so that they would start content creation and add creatives actively. And we can help them get matched with good cost-efficient designers.
So wouldn't it make better sense for you to be closer to your customer? Would it, I was asking, Sajesh, a thought was going through my head while you were saying where do you want to live? It's probably better to live closer to your customer than further away from your customer.
Do you think that's going to be a factor in where you decide to live? Should you be close to the customers physically?
So my personal location? Yes, as a CEO, I think I should live as close as possible to my clients so that I could learn what they want. Yeah.
Okay, Prakash?
Yeah, my question is for Bryan. SJ said that he moved into fintech because that was fashionable and he thought he could get funding. Have you got into blockchain because it's fashionable? Because it's not clear to me what you're doing that's sufficiently different that the blockchain should make a difference.
Right. I mean, I kind of stayed away from going into super specific details about how our what we develop in Yosemite Public Blockchain is different than the traditional blockchain. But to answer the first question regarding whether we're in it for the a fashionable reason, that's not specifically the case. I mean,
Well, it has its merit.
Well,
I mean, yes.
Blockchain, of course, gives you the ability to trace. You can't edit a transaction.
So-
you can add on to further
He still has
information.
to interface with real money somewhere along the way, and he doesn't have a cryptocurrency, so that may be just solving part of the problem.
Right. I mean, we're trying to utilize the blockchain in a sense that we can actually seamlessly, efficiently replace how the process, like how the transactions or how the the operations aspect of how the company runs their businesses are being done. Like for example, I mean, talking about the card or the fintech regarding like a financial institution perspective, for example, a lot of the cost goes into the operations of how these banks or financial institutions trying to spend a lot of the money and resources to maintain the security and the validity of the database that they have for allowing the financial transactions to happen through their platform. Blockchain as a technology can innately replace the need of such a high cost of maintenance, because the technology is what allows the security of the immutability or the transparency of the ledger can be basically subsidized with the utilization of technology.
The absence of deniability of transactions.
Access of
Yeah,
deniability of the transaction.
people can't deny that they have ordered something.
Right. So like it's immutable. The ledger itself is like an immutable ledger, so that you can't hack it, you can't fake it. I mean, mathematically, it's been proven that you can't fake a transactions on blockchain.
We'll discuss it outside.
Yes.
Okay, but it is significant that the cryptocurrency-based blockchain companies all take pieces of the blockchain as tokens, and those tend to act like currency items, like coins or whatever.
Right.
But what you're doing is really taking a transaction
Right.
and attaching that as a piece of the blockchain,
Right.
so that you can really guarantee what has been moved from where to where.
I mean, in a sense that a lot of these like other public blockchains that rely on cryptocurrencies have to pay for like the network fees and the usage fees with the cryptocurrencies, and that itself, with the volatility issue of the price points, is what causes the issues from these businesses to even consider using blockchain, as we personally experienced when we first started it before we were going to build our own protocol, is because it's just not feasible in a sense.
So if somebody uses the Yosemite card, basically they make a purchase just like they would with a regular card, as long as the merchant accepts it.
Exactly. I mean, in our sense, like the blockchain.
It doesn't have to be denominated in any kind of...
No.
Yeah.
We're just using the blockchain as like a ledger book to basically keep all the transactional record and for, I guess, settling the balances.
Yeah, okay, good. Thank you. Next question. Go ahead, Wanjang.
I have two questions, one for Upple and one for Yosemite X. My question for Upple is that Upple is like, according to my understanding, is like connecting the designers with the companies. So my question is like, for companies who are looking for designers, do they go search on your website for designers, or do you have an algorithm to calculate the suitable designers for each company, and you send them an email every day or like every week and recommend suitable like designers for them?
So currently we don't have a huge bunch of customers yet, so we manually do that, but we don't open our designers' info on the website so that we could manually suggest them. So yeah, this is how it works. If you sign up as a client, we recommend designers, but not using the algorithm just yet, maybe in the future, but we do that manually. But you can choose between like 2 to 3 designers we suggest, and then you can work with them.
I also have a question for Yosemite X, because you're talking about like blockchain as a way of safer transfer of money currencies. So my question is that also, like, for example, MasterCard and Visa are turning their attention to like blockchain issues, and also like MasterCard launched a blockchain project in 2016, like to improve the use of blockchain in their like currency transfer business, and they currently own like 30% of all like blockchain related like patents. So I'm wondering, what kind of edge do you have against like such big companies like MasterCard or Visa?
Well, our key advantage compared to, I mean, yes, they have more money and resources than us, and they may have more patents than us and stuff like that. But our key advantage comes from the fact that the MasterCards and the likes of MasterCards and these companies that are trying to utilize blockchain for their company usages, are still trying to rely and depend their usages of the existing technologies. And our conclusion came from the fact that because the existing technologies are not viable for any like a real business case adoption is why we decided to create our own protocol that can actually move away from the network's reliance on native cryptocurrency. The reason why I keep going back to the cryptocurrency stuff is because that's, in my personal opinion, is what is the biggest hindrance or the hurdle that the companies have yet to overcome in order before being able to produce something that is feasible. Again, I mean, this is just my personal opinion, but for any business to actually use blockchain, they have to pay the network fee in Ether or EOS token or the native cryptocurrency. And when that network fee is dependent on the price volatility or subject to the price volatility, I mean, the price of Ether, for example, in the past year, it jumped up and down like 400%, right? At one point, it was like almost like $2,000 something, and then now it's like almost at like $200. So if I, as a business, have to pay with Ether that may be worth $100 tomorrow, and $50 the next day, or $200, like I can't. It's not a reasonable projection. I can't come up with any like a reasonable projection in terms of like how much I have to account for in my usages of this server-like services, which is why we decided to shift away from any like a volatility issue and strictly use the technology for what it's worth.
So Bryan, I want to add just a thing. You talked a lot about how your approach to blockchain is different from other approaches to blockchain, but in answer to Wanjan's question, a big company has a business model, and Visa has, made its business based on a percentage of every transaction. And if what you're doing can undercut that percentage by eliminating a lot of the middle people and not having to have a local bank also guarantee the transaction, then you can really disrupt the credit card business. And it's very unlikely for an existing credit card company to disrupt its own business.
Yes.
Sasha.
I just had a couple, I just had two questions about Yosemite X, and I'm sorry if these are very basic because I'm not an expert in blockchain. But following on what Professor Dasher was saying, what is the value proposition of Yosemite X, like a Yosemite X card for both a consumer and for a merchant? Are you simply trying to decrease the security cost, which would point toward like an acquisition by a credit card company, or are you potentially trying to drastically lower fees to make it more advantageous for a merchant, or something to make it more advantageous for a consumer, which might point toward actually replacing credit cards?
Sorry.
The other question
Well, let's do this one first, and then you can ask the other one.
Yeah, so specifically about the Yosemite card is the fact that we're talking to the merchants to basically accept Yosemite card instead of any other payment method, because this way you can actually don't have to pay. On average, a lot of these businesses are paying anywhere between 3% and 5% per transaction to be taken by Visa, MasterCard, and all the other intermediary services. And we can process, we don't charge any of the transaction fees, so that one, they can actually save the cost of the transaction. But also, we're coming up with, I don't know if you saw on the screen earlier, is that basically it's an app. So like a lot of the customers who are local can search for which of the merchants are on Yosemite card and is offering the rewards. What we're suggesting to the merchants is basically use this as like a marketing platform for them to promote their businesses and be like, hey, you know what, using Yosemite card, because we're saving the cost of the transactions and all this stuff, we're actually giving back, like a cashback service to the consumers who come and buy from us, and because of on top of whatever this reward program, I don't know, stamp card, like a stamp card, for example, is like buy 10 get one free kind of a thing, can be translated into like a cashback service, so that hey, you buy with Yosemite card, you get 10%, 15%, 20% cash back. To the consumer side is a lot more advantageous than whatever credit card they can get on the market, because most credit cards, especially to people who are just starting off after college or whatever, they're not subject to the high-end rich reward credit card, but they're more or less getting like 1%, 2%, 3% cash back. Because we're able to offer a platform where merchants can directly market to the customers directly by offering higher rewards, it's kind of like a win-win situation for both parties to use Yosemite Card instead of relying on the old legacy payment rails.
Okay, good. Sasha, second question.
I get how, so the merchants get zero, the merchants are going to be charged 0 or close to 0%
like per
right,
transaction,
and the
like
customers are going to
transactions,
get
yes.
more cash back
Mhm.
somehow. And what is the benefit to your company, and where is this cash back coming from?
So the cashbacks are coming directly from the merchants who are offering and using, basically from merchants' end, it's kind of like they're taking this as like a marketing opportunity. So whatever marketing cost they partner with like a third-party marketing companies or promotional stamped cards that they're already offering right now, we're just trying to solidify that into, or simplify that by you give it as like a cashback to your customers. And we make money based as a platform provider to one is, like I said earlier, was the margin between how much they're giving us for how much like a cashback they're willing to participate in, and from the group of the users that we have, like the customers. There's like going to be like 2 tiers, like between like a premium customers and the regular customers. Let's say the merchants are offering like 20% cashback, then the premium users are going to be the one is able to get up to 20%, like all 20%, and the regular members are earning 12%, so that we can marginalize on that 8% in between for the regular people, regular members.
The company makes the money on the spread and the cashback.
Yes.
Okay. So the other just basic question is, I'm aware as a non-blockchain expert that things like Bitcoin are a gigantic drain on energy supplies in terms of mining Bitcoins. Does that only apply to a cryptocurrency and not to this kind of a use of blockchain?
So that applies to Bitcoin specifically and the older generations of like the public blockchains, because that energy draining problem has to do with the fact that they're reliant on like a proof of work, which is how the network as a whole reach consensus. We developed like a proof of transaction as like our own consensus mechanism, which does not require as crazy of resources. I mean, we can talk about it. I mean, given the duration of the time that we have, we can talk about it afterwards. But I'll be more than happy to answer that in more detail.
Okay. Before we go on, SJ, I want to follow up, because what you were talking about, Bryan, is really kind of what is distinctive about your approach, and so barriers to entry for other people who might be trying to do the same thing. SJ, in what you're doing, what is the real kind of competitiveness for Upple to make sure that somebody like a big HR firm or LinkedIn or somebody like that can't just run you out of business?
Yeah, that's a good question. I see the offer I give is two big things. The first one is the market of cost-efficient designers, and I think since, as I mentioned, Korean designers are looking for jobs and they are very talented, it can be a competitive advantage in the beginning. And actually, the second part is the collaboration tool itself that helps the communication between designers and non-designers. And I think it has more potential in the long term. Even in these days, when you're working with designers, it's not easy because they use their own jargons and they have their own expressions, their way of expressions.
And I can also imagine that from the point of view of the designer, most clients are very fuzzy in what they say they want.
Yes. So we are trying to solve those kind of problems inside our platform, and also we have planned to make it publicly available for other platforms. So yeah, and I think not enough people are very interested in about solving those kind of professionals and those kind of communication issues between professionals and non-professionals. Maybe in blockchain as well. You know, you don't have to know everything about blockchain to talk about the business, but you have to know at least the specs, or you should be able to convey the information you would like to know. But since you don't fully understand the blockchain, you cannot ask the right question, right?
Yeah.
So I think all areas that requires professionalism, that can be our
Technical
next
on one side and not technical on the other.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I saw a couple of hands over here. You first.
Yeah, my name is Chris, and I'm co-founder of Upple. I'm just here to support my CEO. But I have a question to Bryan specifically. So maybe you said this, and I just wasn't paying attention fully. But my question was, what's really in it for the customers? Customers buying merchandise using your card. Is it just the exclusive rewards you get through that partnership that you have with the merchants, or is there more to it?
First of all, it will be the more direct way of answering that is yes, it is, because using Yosemite Cart, they're able to earn much more rewards than what they would otherwise use with, I guess, like a basic credit card. Compared to like that 1 to 3% cashback offer that typically a lot of the regular credit cards tend to have. Yosemite Cart has, it ranges between merchants, but anywhere from 5 to sometimes even up to 30% cashback that they're able to earn. So that would be the main reason why anybody would use, because it's more beneficial for them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there right now? Are you running a pilot with closed group of initial users, or?
So we rolled out the initial technology to basically work out, I guess, the kinks and beta testing in a closed setting, and we are currently working with acquiring the early adopters to be able to work with them upon our official launch come at the end of the month.
So that means you've got some customer side users and you've also got some merchant side.
Who have expressed their willingness to from the merchant side to participate and offer 20%, 30% cash back to their customers.
So this is, in a way, it's very much lean startup movement, kind of, minimally viable product and get it out there and get market feedback. Do you think that YT or anybody else connected with the company intentionally tried to follow the lean startup model, or is this just sort of natural?
Well, in a sense, like we were, this has been our, I guess, like a go-to market strategy.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that we didn't have much to, I guess, like prove ourselves from the get-go. So we were like, you know what, this is what we have. Instead of taking a long time to basically meeting the right partners, meeting the right people to basically showcase what we can do, let's just prove it with what we can do, which is basically the hands-on approach that we wanted to go out there and generate results ourselves.
Okay, good. Jerry, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I have about 24 questions, but I'll just...
Some of those we can take outside, okay?
So, in establishing your network, how big is it right now? How many nodes?
Oh,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, so basically, Yosemite Public Blockchain, like it went live a couple months ago, and all the nodes that are being tested are, not tested, but initial nodes are part of them are ourselves. Basically, the service providers that are going to be using the network is going to be what the who are going to be the nodes and the block producers of the network. So right now, it's not that big in a sense that we only have like a very limited number of
So it's a
participants.
semi-public
So-
blockchain right now.
In a sense, yes. But before we can actually, because we don't have like the cryptocurrency, because we didn't do an ICO, we didn't have like a cryptocurrency to like generate a lot of interest from these businesses by giving away those tokens. So we wanted to first provide the feasibility and the usability, prove the usability of the network by creating a service and running that to basically create a use case statement that, hey, Yosemite Public Blockchain is actually viable, so that we can actually invite a lot of the enterprise partners that we are currently in talks with to be able to give them, I guess, like a sense of a reason to understand how they can use Yosemite Public Blockchain to better their business.
How is validation incentivized? And your token, what's it pegged to?
So the thing is, like, we don't have a token. Like, there's no like Yosemite token. So it's like a fundamentally different concept of like how the traditional blockchain works. But basically, all the block producers are going to be made up of all the service providers who are already generating their sales and their service using using the blockchain as their system. So because they're already an active participant on the network, their incentive to become a block producer is not to earn tokens or not to earn money from it, but in order to make sure that their activity can be sustained over a period of time, is their incentive to participate in making sure that blocks are being produced in the correct way and making sure that all the, there's nothing going on suspicious.
So not to get too much into the technicalities of blockchain, I would like to point out that last year in our programs we featured a company that was joint between here and Shanghai that was doing something very similar, really sort of blockchain version 3.0, minus the current cryptocurrency, for data from automobiles. And the company's name was CarBlock. And I think they're still quite active as a totally different kind of use case where data from automobiles could be traded. And the blockchain really enabled the cars to do the trading and the owners just to get the results. So there are all sorts of new ideas in this area out. And one thing that attracted me to Yosemite is that this is a new kind of generation of blockchain. It's really a new use of the whole technology approach. I want to ask both of you, what do you miss about Korea?
Well, I'm going back to Korea next week, so I'm...
Okay, so you're not... You're,
yeah, I'm not missing it too much, but yeah. So when I'm in Korea, I have my own network, even in startups, and I know investors, my old friends doing startups as well. So those kind of active discussions like I had today, I can have a lot of that, and that's maybe the one thing I miss.
okay. Bryan?
For me, it would have to be the fact, like my parents are in Korea, and I don't get to see them as often, I guess, as I would have been if I were stationed in Korea, I guess.
Yeah.
We get to see each other probably like a couple times a year, maybe. Yeah.
Another question kind of about Korea. Both of you talked about Korean government money.
Yeah.
From the standpoint of the entrepreneur, how do you apply for this stuff? I mean, if you're Korean and you're an entrepreneur, how do you find out about the availability of the government money? And do you have to go through a private sector investor, or do you go straight and apply for a government grant, like a small business grant?
You have both ways. So most of Korean VC investors, they use government money to fund the startups. And there are a lot of grant programs in Korea. Actually, there are too many of them, so that there's a dedicated startup to, curate those informations and feed them to the startups, and let you know which one is for yours and which one isn't for yours.
Yeah.
So yeah, those kind of sources are what we use.
Okay.
Yeah, I personally don't have like a direct experience myself with it, but it's to my understanding that a lot of this, even the private sector's fundings, are coming from the government subsidized money that their governments are giving to the private sectors. Be like, hey, you can use this to support, the startups and invest in them. So I was told that it's not like much of a difficult task to, at least get in touch with them. I guess a comment that we, as far as I know, is the fact that the use of the money, the use of the fund could be better regulated or better organized, I guess.
So this is kind of a really broad question, but for both of you, this is one thing that is a feature of the Korean system right now, is this government money. Are you seeing, what kind of changes are you seeing really in the last year or two in the startup sort of world in Korea? Are there a lot more thanks to this money, or are people saying, yeah, maybe you ought not to take this, or what's happening? Are we getting a lot more startup companies?
Yeah, I think the startup scene is growing very rapidly. But as I briefly mentioned in my slides, there are pros and cons. If you feed money to all startups, the startups that should be dead, they survive. And I'm not sure if how that capitalism works. And how that should work.
Fairness is not an interesting concept in investing, right?
Right. So yeah, but still, I see a lot of interesting startups doing very different trials, and yeah, it makes it more. Yeah, it gives more chance to see a successful ones.
Bryan, are you staying in touch with friends or family, childhood friends in Korea, and are you seeing any changes in attitudes or trends in entrepreneurship?
I think from the news even, I think we can hear a lot more of like the startups that are startup scenes that are growing in market in general, which I think is a good thing. And I think what needs to be done is a better way of utilizing that program. Like what SJ just mentioned. If we equally distribute, $100,000 amongst like 100 companies, versus, we could subsidize $1 million for 10, proven companies. That could be a lot more resource that is utilized to the right direction, and put into better use, quite frankly speaking. So, I think that could come, I guess, with experience of, how the launch of this program can further develop into.
Go ahead.
So I had a couple of questions regarding foreigners and the role that they play in the startup ecosystem in South Korea. So I was wondering if there are, how many foreigners actually are working in these startups? Do they have a chance to play an important role? So are some of them in C-level positions? And this could include like members of the Korean diaspora, so Korean Americans as well. And even though the government has started a fund, a very large fund, it doesn't seem like they have made a lot of efforts to make the legal side easier for foreigners to work in Korea. So I was wondering if that has changed recently.
Sorry, not to shy away from it, but that's something that I'm not really aware of or in a position to comment anything about. So, yeah.
So you got anything on that?
Yeah, so when I was in Sentbe, the Sentbe was actually helping Southeast Asian people to send their money back to their country. So we had to hire Southeast Asian employees to help for the CS. And Yeah, I think the case is different if the company is seeing the market in the United States and other overseas countries, or the company is focusing on the Korean market. If the company is focusing on the Korean market, I don't think you have good chance of working in that company as a foreigner because they use Korean and they talk in Korean and they don't have any reason to communicate in foreign language. But if it's the other case, I think you have good chance to work in Korean startups as well. But also, I wasn't the person who were responsible for the visa of the employees in our company. It wasn't easy, but it was possible. I think it's a little bit easier than the States. So yeah, if you have the skill sets the company wants, I think you can find the job you're looking for in the Korea.
So I'd also like to comment on this. Over the years, we've had foreigners who live in Korea and have done startup companies and have moved over to the venture investing side. So these people do exist. Of course, they're small numbers of people. But what you say about, a lot of unemployed designers, those are skilled people. And so if the condition in the country is unemployment from key people like college graduates, then definitely that's going to be a big objective for government policy is to solve that problem. And I think that's probably what's going on with the current situation right now, that the real sort of democratic government problem that they have to deal with is unemployment. And so this is, trying to stimulate more startup companies is the way. I think let's call into the formal part of the discussion. We've got some refreshments outside and hope that you'll stay around and talk with our speakers and talk with each other a little bit outside. But first, please join me in thanking SJ and Bryan for a great presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.